When 7 Crimson Tempest bikers cornered a lone nurse at Ravencrest Fuel Stop, they thought they had found their evening's entertainment. Instead, they encountered a decorated combat medic whose battlefield skills would not only save their lives, but spark a revolution in street medicine that would change how first responders operate worldwide. What unfolded that stormy night would be viewed over 50 million times online, transform an entire town's emergency response system, and prove that sometimes the most powerful healers aren't found in hospitals, but in the darkest corners of our streets. Don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story will show you how one person's courage can change a system that everyone thought was broken. The late October wind howled through the empty gas pumps at Ravencrest Fuel Stop, carrying with it the sharp scent of approaching rain. Dr. Thalia Valenwind adjusted her azure scrubs under her weathered leather jacket, the silver caduceus pin on her collar catching the fluorescent light. At 34, her athletic frame carried the quiet composure of someone who had treated more battlefield trauma than most doctors see in a lifetime, though nothing in her calm demeanor suggested she was anything more than another tired healthcare worker grabbing coffee after a long shift. "The usual, Doc?" Nyxon Nyx Reeves called from behind the counter, already reaching for the large dark roast. The former Navy Corpsman had run Ravencrest for nearly a decade, turning the remote fuel stop into an unofficial sanctuary for night shift workers and long-haul truckers. "Thanks, Nyx. How's the shoulder healing?" Thalia asked, noticing his careful movements as he poured the coffee. "Better since you showed me those PT exercises. Still can't believe you learned all that trauma medicine in the sandbox." He shook his head, adding the splash of almond milk she preferred. 3 tours as a combat medic, and now you're running Azure Peak's Trauma Center. You're full of surprises, Doc. "Some things are better left quiet," Thalia replied, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Besides, that life is behind me now. These days, I prefer saving lives in sterile rooms rather than under mortar fire." The bell above the door chimed, but instead of the usual truckers or medical staff, 7 members of the Crimson Tempest's motorcycle gang swaggered in. Their black leather cuts bore patches that promised violence, and their leader, a towering figure known as Cypher, carried himself with the menacing confidence of someone used to making others back down. "Well, what do we have here?" Cypher's voice cut through the quiet hum of the refrigerator units. "Looks like we found ourselves a pretty little nurse." His eyes fixed on Thalia's scrubs, a predatory smile spreading across his face. Thalia watched their reflection in the coffee machine's chrome surface, her tactical mind automatically assessing the situation. Cypher stood about 6 feet 4 inches, easily 260 pounds. His second in command, a lean man with a jagged scar running from eye to jaw, kept his hand near his vest pocket. The other 5 spread out through the store, their heavy boots echoing on the linoleum floor. "Hey, sweetheart," one of the bikers called out, deliberately knocking over a display of energy drinks. "Looks like you've got a mess to clean up." A young woman in the back corner, probably no more than 20, clutched her phone to her chest, trying to make herself invisible behind the chip rack. A tired-looking truck driver by the coffee machine began slowly backing toward the door. "Oh, what's wrong?" Cypher laughed, noticing the trucker's retreat. "Don't leave now. Maybe Nurse Girl can give us all checkups." His gang's laughter had an ugly edge to it. "The door's clear," Thalia said calmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Anyone who wants to leave should do so now." The store fell silent. Cypher turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as they met Thalia's steady gaze. "Well, look what we have here, boys. Seems like someone forgot their manners." "Actually," Thalia replied, setting her coffee down with deliberate care, "I learned my manners treating casualties under fire. 3 tours as a combat medic tend to teach you a thing or two about trauma, both causing it and treating it." Cypher's laugh was forced, uncertainty flickering in his eyes as he processed her words. "Combat medic? You expect us to believe that?" "Don't have to believe it, but you do need to let these people leave." Thalia's voice remained calm, but her posture had subtly shifted, her weight balanced perfectly, hands relaxed but ready. "You know what happens to people who get in our way?" Cypher growled, taking a step closer. "Actually, I do." Thalia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. But the real question is, do you know what happens when you threaten someone who's performed emergency surgery during a firefight? The young woman had managed to slip toward the door, phone still recording. Nyx had disappeared into the back, hopefully calling the police. Thalia calculated response times. 7 minutes minimum for the first patrol car to arrive in this remote location. "Last chance to mind your own business, nurse," Cypher snarled, closing the distance. "Protecting civilians is my business. 15 years of combat medicine didn't end when I hung up my uniform." The biker with the scar lunged forward suddenly, his hand emerging from his vest with brass knuckles glinting. His movement was telegraphed. Amateur. Nothing like the trained insurgents Thalia had faced in combat zones. She stepped smoothly aside, using his momentum to guide him face first into the coffee machine. Hot liquid sprayed across the counter as carafes toppled, and the scent of burnt coffee filled the air. "You're going to regret that," Cypher snarled, his massive frame tensing as his companion struggled to regain his footing, coffee dripping from his leather cut. "Nobody messes with the Crimson Tempests." "I've heard that kind of talk before," Thalia replied, her voice maintaining its professional calm. "Usually from people who don't understand the difference between causing pain and knowing how to stop it. I'm trained in both." 2 more bikers moved to flank her while another blocked the door. The young woman who had been recording was now safely outside, her phone still capturing everything through the storefront window. Thalia remained centered, her breathing steady, hands relaxed at her sides. The combat medical training that had kept her and her patients alive through 3 tours was about to serve a different purpose. "Get her!" Cypher roared, but as his men moved in, they were about to learn why combat medics were considered among the military's most versatile operators, and why this quiet nurse was about to become an internet sensation. The first biker charged, swinging a heavy chain in a wide arc. Thalia ducked under it while simultaneously reaching for the sanitizer dispenser on the counter. As the chain whistled over her head, she sprayed the solution directly into his eyes. He staggered back, dropping the chain and clutching his face. "Basic field improvisation," Thalia commented, already moving to face the next threat. Sometimes the best weapons are medical supplies. The scarred biker had recovered, now wielding his brass knuckles with more caution. He circled her, looking for an opening. "Not so tough without your army behind you, are you?" "Actually," Thalia replied, gesturing at the security cameras and the growing crowd of phones recording through the windows. "You just made this easier. Assault is one thing. Assault with weapons on camera, that's serious time." He hesitated for just a moment, exactly what Thalia had counted on. Her foot swept his legs out from under him while simultaneously striking a precise point on his brachial nerve. The brass knuckles clattered to the floor along with their wielder, who found his entire arm suddenly unresponsive. "Pressure points and nerve clusters," Thalia explained to the stunned onlookers. "First thing they teach us in battlefield medicine. Sometimes you have to subdue patients for their own good." The third biker pulled a switchblade, its steel catching the fluorescent lights. Thalia's expression changed for the first time, showing genuine concern, not for herself, but for him. "Think carefully," she warned. "Right now, this is just a scuffle. Pull that blade, and you're looking at armed assault charges. Plus," she added with professional detachment, "the angle you're holding that knife tells me you've never used one in a real fight. You're more likely to cut yourself than me." The biker looked at his fallen friends, then at his knife, then at Thalia's utterly composed stance. He dropped the blade and backed away. "I ain't fighting no combat, Doc," he muttered, heading for the door. "Smart choice," Thalia nodded. "Now it's just you, Cypher." The gang leader's face had turned an alarming shade of red. With a roar, he charged forward, all technique abandoned in favor of raw power. Thalia sidestepped smoothly, years of training taking over. She caught his arm, used his own momentum to spin him around, and suddenly Cypher found himself face down on the floor, his arm locked behind him in a hold that sent waves of pain shooting through his shoulder. "Listen carefully," Thalia spoke softly, but everyone in the now silent store could hear her words. "I could dislocate your shoulder right now easily, but I won't, because that's not what healers do. We fix people. We don't break them unless we absolutely have to." "Let me go," Cypher growled, but the fight had gone out of his voice. "First, you're going to promise me something. You and your gang are never going to threaten anyone at this station again. Understand?" Cypher tried to struggle, but Thalia applied slightly more pressure. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He gasped in pain. Okay, I promise." Thalia released him and stepped back, staying ready just in case. But Cypher just sat up, rubbing his shoulder and staring at her with a mixture of fear and, surprisingly, respect. "Your men need medical attention," Thalia pointed to the bikers struggling to get up. "There's a clinic 3 blocks from here. I suggest you take them there, then go home and think about what happened today." The sound of police sirens filled the air. Cypher looked at Thalia, then at his injured friends. "This isn't over," he muttered, but his heart wasn't in it. "Actually, it is," Thalia replied. "But how it's over, that's up to you. You can leave here tonight as the gang leader who got beaten by a nurse, or you can leave thinking about why a combat medic would risk herself to protect strangers at a gas station." Officer Soren Hawthorne was the first through the door, hand on his weapon. He took in the scene. The spilled coffee, scattered medical supplies, the young woman still filming through the window, and the group of battered bikers being helped to their feet. His eyes fixed on Thalia, recognition dawning. "Doctor Valenwind? Everything okay here?" he asked, though his slight smile suggested he already knew the answer. "Just a small disagreement about proper gas station etiquette, Sergeant," Thalia replied, already moving to check on the biker she'd struck in the brachial nerve cluster. "Though these gentlemen might need some medical attention." "Want to press charges?" Hawthorne asked, watching as Thalia professionally examined the scarred biker's arm. Thalia considered for a moment, her fingers expertly finding pressure points to restore circulation. "No," she said finally. "I think everyone learned something tonight, didn't we, Cypher?" The gang leader met her eyes briefly, then looked away. "Yeah," he mumbled, watching with evident surprise as she treated his men with the same care she'd show any patient. "We did." As the bikers limped out under police escort, the gathered crowd outside burst into applause. Thalia tried to wave it off, but Nyx was already announcing that coffee was free for everyone for the rest of the night. "That was incredible." Azrael as Everlyn approached, phone still recording. "Are you really a combat medic? Can you teach others to do that?" "Was," Thalia corrected gently, beginning to clean up the scattered supplies. "Now I run the trauma response training program at Azure Peaks. Speaking of which." She turned to look out the window where Cypher sat on his bike, still not starting it, still watching. "I think I might have found some new students." The next morning, Thalia walked into the Azure Peaks Medical Center to find her colleague, Dr. Vesper Calloway, waiting with a tablet. "Have you seen this?" she asked, pulling up a video that already had over 300,000 views. "Combat medic nurse shows bikers the true meaning of do no harm. You're trending on every medical forum." "It's not that big a deal." Thalia tried to deflect, checking her patient charts. "Just did what any trained professional would do." "No," Vesper insisted, following her into the trauma center. "What you did was show people that healthcare workers aren't just victims waiting to happen. Do you know how many nurses and medical staff have been sharing this? You've given us a voice." Before Thalia could respond, her phone rang. It was Nyx from the gas station. "Doc, you need to get down here. Something's happening." "Trouble?" Thalia was already reaching for her jacket. "No, just, you should see this for yourself." When Thalia arrived at Ravencrest Fuel Stop 15 minutes later, she stopped short in the parking lot. The place was packed with motorcycles, but not Crimson Tempests. These were from other local clubs, and their riders were inside buying coffee and talking quietly with Nyx. A large man in a leather vest stood up as she entered. His patch identified him as the president of the Steel Guardians MC. "Dr. Valenwind, got a minute?" Thalia walked over, aware that the whole station was watching. The biker extended his hand. "Name's Magnus. I represent several of the legitimate motorcycle clubs in the area. What happened here last night? That's not what we're about. The Tempests give all bikers a bad name. We wanted you to know that we're here to support this establishment and its customers." That's unexpected, Thalia replied honestly, shaking his hand. There's more, Magnus continued. We heard you run the trauma response program at Azure Peaks. A lot of our members are first responders, EMTs. We'd like to help. Maybe set up a motorcycle rapid response unit for accidents in remote areas. Give our skills a positive focus. Before Thalia could respond, the station's door opened again. Everyone turned to look. It was Talon, the youngest of the Crimson Tempests from last night, but he wasn't wearing his colors anymore. Dr. Valenwind? His voice shook slightly. Can I talk to you privately? Thalia nodded and led him to a quiet corner by the coffee machine. The young man couldn't meet her eyes at first. I was a paramedic student, he finally said. Before the Tempests, when I couldn't handle the pressure, the death, they felt like an escape. But last night, watching you reminded me of my old instructor, always in control, always helping others, even the ones trying to hurt you. And now? Thalia asked gently. I want out, but it's not just me. Cypher. He's been talking all night. What you said about being a healer instead of a fighter, it hit him hard. He's got a sister in nursing school. She saw the video this morning and called him crying, asked him why he was terrorizing people like her. Thalia sat back, processing this information. What are you asking for, Talon? Help. Not just for me, for all of us. Most of the Tempests, we're lost souls looking for purpose. You showed us there's another way to be strong. The station had gone quiet, everyone trying to listen in. Thalia was aware of the phones still recording, of how this moment might be another turning point. The trauma response training program starts at 9, she said finally. Come by tomorrow. Bring anyone who wants to change. We'll figure something out. Talon's eyes lit up with hope. Really? Even after what we did? Especially after what you did, because you're proving my point. Real strength isn't about causing trauma. It's about healing it. And sometimes the ones who understand that best are the ones who've caused it before. As Talon left, wiping his eyes, Magnus approached again. We'll help, he said simply. Any of the Tempests who want to reform, they'll have support from the legitimate clubs. We can provide bikes for a rapid response unit, teach maintenance, help with training. Thalia looked around the station, now full of an unlikely mix. Bikers from various clubs, medical students who had seen the video and come to show support, first responders offering to help. Her phone buzzed again. Another news outlet wanting an interview, but this time she didn't ignore it. Maybe it was time to tell this story, not just about one fight in a gas station, but about transforming those who cause trauma into those who heal it. Magnus, she called out. That offer about the motorcycle rapid response unit. Let's talk details. The next morning, Thalia arrived at Azure Peaks Medical Center early, preparing the trauma response training room for what might come. At 8:45, the first motorcycle rumbled into the parking lot. It was Cypher, alone, without his Crimson Tempest's cut. Didn't think you'd be first, Thalia said, meeting him at the door. Couldn't sleep, he admitted, his voice stripped of its previous aggression. Been watching that video over and over, seeing myself, seeing what we'd become. He pulled out his phone, showing Thalia a picture of a young woman in nursing scrubs, maybe 23 years old. This is Marie, my sister. She called me yesterday morning crying, asked me when I stopped being her hero and became everything she was training to heal against. Thalia nodded, unlocking the center's doors. That must have been hard to hear. Hardest thing I've ever heard. Even harder than when our parents died, leaving me to raise her. Cypher followed her inside, looking around at the medical training equipment with a mixture of awe and regret. Thing is, watching you fight, it wasn't just about the moves. It was how you carried yourself. Controlled, purposeful, like my sister's nursing instructors. Before I lost my way, I was an EMT trainee myself. More motorcycles pulled up outside. Talon arrived with 3 other Tempests, then came Magnus with some Steel Guardians members. By 9 o'clock, the training room was full of leather vests and uncertain faces. Dr. Vesper Calloway stood in the doorway, watching with amazement. Thalia took her place at the front of the room, looking at the unlikely group. "So, who wants to go first?" Talon raised his hand. "I worked EMS for 6 months. When I lost my first patient, a kid, I couldn't handle it. The Tempests gave me what I was missing: adrenaline, brotherhood, a way to feel powerful instead of helpless." Others began sharing. Out of 15 Tempests present, 7 had some form of medical or emergency response training they'd abandoned. 4 were former military with basic field medical experience. All of them were looking for something they couldn't quite name. "Here's what we're going to do," Thalia announced, pulling out a digital projector. "First, we're starting a motorcycle emergency response unit, Meru. Magnus and the Steel Guardians are offering their expertise in rapid deployment and bike handling. You want redemption? Start by saving lives." She brought up more slides, showing statistics about emergency response times in remote areas. "Second, those of you with medical training will get you recertified. Those without it will train you from scratch. EMT, paramedic, whatever level you're ready for." Cypher stood up. "I want to talk to the nursing school, tell them what happened. Show them how to handle violent patients without becoming violent themselves." "Good," Thalia nodded. "That's on the list too." The meeting ran for 4 hours. By the end, they had a comprehensive plan. The Crimson Tempests would disband, but something new would take its place. A specialized motorcycle-mounted medical response team focusing on remote areas and rapid intervention. "We need a new name," Talon suggested. "Mercy Riders," someone called out. "Because we're riding to help now, not to hurt." The energy in the room shifted. These men who had come in looking defeated were sitting straighter, eyes bright with purpose. Thalia recognized that look. She'd seen it in countless combat medics who'd found their calling in the chaos of war. Later that afternoon, Thalia returned to Ravencrest Fuel Stop. Nyx had saved her usual spot, but she wasn't alone. Dr. Vesper was waiting with him. "Heard about this morning," Vesper said as Thalia sat down. "Word spreading fast. You know what this means, right? That I'll never have a quiet cup of coffee again?" "No," Vesper laughed. "It means we're seeing something new. When that video went viral, everyone focused on the fight. But the real story is what's happening now." Nyx brought coffee without being asked. "The station's becoming quite the spot," he reported. "Had some Mercy Riders in here earlier. They helped a stroke victim who collapsed in the parking lot. Got her stabilized before the ambulance even arrived." Thalia's phone buzzed. It was a message from Cypher. "Marie wants to do her clinical rotation with Meru. Says she wants to learn how to heal with strength like her big brother is learning." As Thalia typed a reply, she thought about how much had changed in just 2 days. The viral video had captured a few minutes of action, but the real transformation was happening now, in quiet moments and small choices. "We're going to need more training space," Vesper mused, watching more motorcycles pull into the station's parking lot. "Word's getting out. Medical response teams from other counties are calling, asking if we can help start something similar." "One step at a time," Thalia cautioned, but she was smiling. "Let's make sure this works here first." Through the window, she watched as Talon helped an elderly man who'd stumbled near the gas pumps, his medical assessment as gentle as it was professional. Nearby, 2 former Tempests were teaching a rookie EMT how to safely dismount a response bike while carrying medical equipment. A week after the gas station incident, Thalia stood in the Azure Peaks Medical Center parking lot, watching an incredible transformation unfold. What had once been an ordinary hospital lot was now a carefully orchestrated staging area for the Mercy Riders' emergency response training. "All right, simulation scenario 3, Thalia called out, checking her stopwatch. "Remote accident, multiple casualties, difficult terrain. Show me what you've got." Cypher, now wearing a black paramedic trainee uniform with a Mercy Riders patch, kicked his response bike into gear. 3 other riders fell into formation behind him, their bikes modified with medical panniers and emergency equipment. The scene was a far cry from their intimidating gang rides of just days ago. 4 minutes to target location, Cypher's voice crackled over the radio. "Talon, take point on initial triage. Jensen, set up the mobile treatment area. Marie, you're with me on primary assessment." Marie, Cypher's sister, had become an unexpected bridge between the nursing school and the Mercy Riders. Her clinical rotation with Meru was already challenging traditional emergency response protocols. Multiple casualties spotted, Talon reported as they reached the simulation area. 2 critical, 3 walking wounded. Terrain's too rough for standard ambulance access. What happened next would have been unbelievable just a week ago. The former gang members executed a perfect emergency response protocol, their bikes easily navigating the difficult terrain that would have stopped traditional vehicles. Their knowledge of the area's back roads and shortcuts, once used for avoiding law enforcement, now served to save precious minutes in emergency response times. "Time!" Thalia called out 15 minutes later. "That's a new record for the scenario. The skills you learned riding in formation as a gang, they translate perfectly to coordinated emergency response." Dr. Cyrus Windcrest, the hospital administrator, approached Thalia with an impressed look. "I was skeptical when you proposed this program," he admitted, watching as the riders efficiently packed up their medical gear. "But these response times are unprecedented. They're reaching patients in remote areas twice as fast as traditional ambulances." "It's not just the response times," Thalia replied, handing him a tablet with the latest data. "Look at the community engagement metrics." The numbers were startling. In just 1 week, emergency call response times in remote areas had dropped by 40%. More surprisingly, violence against medical personnel in the hospital's coverage area had decreased by 60%. The presence of former gang members as protectors rather than threats had created an unexpected ripple effect. Dr. Valenwind. Lyra Blackthorne, a local news reporter, approached with her camera crew. "Can you comment on the rumors that other hospitals are looking to implement similar programs?" Before Thalia could respond, a real emergency call crackled over the radio. "Multiple vehicle accident on Ridge Road, area inaccessible to standard emergency vehicles due to mudslide. Any available Mercy Riders respond." "Show them," Thalia told Lyra, gesturing to the rapidly mobilizing riders. "This is your story." The response was seamless. Within seconds, Cypher led a team of 4 riders out of the parking lot, their bikes' emergency lights cutting through the gathering dusk. The news crew scrambled to follow in their van. "Base, this is Mercy 1. Cypher's voice was calm and professional over the radio. "ETA 3 minutes. We have access through the old logging road." Thalia and Dr. Windcrest watched the scene unfold on the emergency response monitors. The Mercy Riders reached the accident scene a full 12 minutes before the nearest ambulance could find an alternate route. The camera crew captured everything as the former gang members, now trained first responders, stabilized the victims, and established a landing zone for the medical helicopter. "This is incredible," Lyra breathed, filming as Marie calmly talked a trapped victim through the panic, while her brother, once known for causing trauma, now worked to treat it. "But how did you know they could change like this?" Thalia watched the monitor, where Talon was carefully splinting a child's arm while telling jokes to keep her calm. "Because they never needed to learn how to be strong," she answered. "They just needed to learn how to use their strength to heal instead of harm." Back at the hospital, more changes were becoming apparent. The emergency department, once tense whenever motorcycle groups arrived, now had a different atmosphere. Former gang members waited respectfully in the waiting room, often helping to calm other patients or assist elderly visitors. "Got something you need to see," Magnus said, approaching Thalia with his tablet. The Steel Guardian's president pulled up a map dotted with points of light. Each marker is a motorcycle club that's contacted us about starting their own Mercy Riders program. We've got interest from 3 states already. Dr. Vesper joined them, adding her own report. The nursing school wants to create a specialized curriculum for motorcycle response medics. They're calling it the Rapid Response Rider Program. Marie's already helping design the training modules. Thalia was about to respond when another call came in. This time it was different. "This is County General Hospital," a voice crackled over the emergency band. "We've got a situation. Rival gang members in the ER, tension escalating. Any Mercy Riders available to assist with de-escalation?" The tension in County General's emergency room was palpable when Thalia arrived with a team of Mercy Riders. 2 rival gang factions faced each other across the waiting room, family members of injured riders from both sides creating a powder keg of emotions. Cypher, take the west entrance. Magnus, east. Talon, you're with me, Thalia directed, her combat medic experience seamlessly transitioning to civilian crisis management. Remember, this is a hospital. We protect the healers. The scene inside was worse than reported. A dozen members of the Phantom Disciples squared off against equal numbers of the Street Kings, with terrified medical staff caught in the middle. An elderly patient in a wheelchair sat forgotten in the crossfire, her heart monitor beeping frantically. Interesting choice, Thalia said loudly, her voice cutting through the tension. Every head turned. Fighting in an ER. You do realize you're surrounded by people who know exactly where every major artery is, right? The attempted humor, delivered with professional deadpan, caught them off guard. A few nervous chuckles broke the silence. More importantly, she continued, nodding to Talon, who smoothly moved to check on the elderly patient. You're interfering with people's care. That's not what riders do. Is it, Cypher? Cypher stepped forward, his Mercy Rider's uniform carrying a different kind of authority than his old gang colors ever did. A week ago, I would have been leading a fight like this. Now, I'm learning there's more power in saving lives than taking them. The leader of the Phantom Disciples, a heavily tattooed man called Wraith, scoffed. What happened to you, man? Heard you got taken down by a nurse, now you're playing paramedic? That nurse? Cypher pointed to Thalia. She didn't just take me down. She showed me how to stand up. You want to see real power? Watch this. He turned to the elderly patient Talon was attending. Ma'am, I'm a paramedic trainee. May I check your blood pressure? This situation seems stressful. The simple act of professional care, performed by someone who once inspired fear, transformed the atmosphere. The Street King's leader, watching Cypher gently wrap the blood pressure cuff, lowered his fists. What is this? He asked, genuine curiosity replacing anger. This is the Mercy Riders, Magnus explained, his Steel Guardian's experience lending weight to his words. We're changing what it means to be strong. Your people ride well, know every backstreet in the city. Imagine using those skills to save lives instead of risk them. Thalia moved through the crowd, her trauma nurse training catching details. You, she pointed to a Street King member trying to hide his arm. That's a nasty gash. Let me look at it. As she cleaned and bandaged the wound, she spoke quietly. You've got good veins. Ever considered training as a phlebotomist? Hospitals always need skilled blood draw specialists. The tension continued to dissolve as more Mercy Riders arrived, each demonstrating their new purpose. Marie, now confident in her nursing student role, organized the waiting room into proper triage order, assigning former gang members to help monitor patients. See this? Thalia addressed the group, pointing to the now smoothly functioning ER. This is real power. Anyone can cause chaos. It takes true strength to create order. Wraith watched as his own lieutenant, inspired by the scene, helped an elderly man with his walker. How? He started, then corrected himself. Where did this program come from? Started with a fight at a gas station, Thalia explained. Turned into something more. We're always looking for new recruits, especially people who know the streets, understand the community. The shift in energy was remarkable. Gang members who had been ready to fight were now asking about training programs, EMT certification requirements, and ride-along opportunities. This changes everything, Dr. Vesper observed, joining Thalia as the situation stabilized. We've been trying to reduce ER violence for years. Never thought the solution would be to recruit from the very groups we feared. Officer Soren Hawthorne, arriving to what he expected to be a gang fight, instead found former rivals exchanging contact information for the next Mercy Riders training session. You know what the interesting part is? He said to Thalia. Gang-related emergency calls are down 50% since your program started. Turns out, people think twice about causing trouble when their potential victims might be training their next paramedic. Late that evening, back at Ravencrest Fuel Stop, Thalia found an unexpected group waiting. Wraith and the Street King's leader sat with Cypher and Magnus surrounded by maps of the city. Doc, Cypher called out. Remember how we talked about expanding the rapid response program? These gentlemen have some ideas about coverage zones. Nyx brought coffee for everyone, watching with amazement as former enemies planned emergency response routes together. Each club, knows their territory best, Wraith explained, highlighting areas on the map. Between us, we could cut emergency response times in half throughout the city. Plus, the Street King's leader added, we've got members in every neighborhood. People who need help sometimes don't trust official responders, but they know us. Thalia studied their proposal, seeing the potential. You understand this isn't just about riding bikes and wearing new patches? This is serious medical training, professional certification, real responsibility. That's what we want, Wraith replied, his face earnest. All these years we've been fighting for respect. Maybe it's time we earned it by actually helping our communities. The transformation of County General's ER became the catalyst for something bigger than anyone expected. Within days, the video of former gang members helping hospital staff went viral, joining the original gas station confrontation footage. But it was what happened next that truly changed the game. You need to see this, Marie burst into Thalia's office at Azure Peaks early Monday morning. The young nursing student's tablet displayed a map of the city with an intricate network of colored zones. The former gangs, they've been working all night. They've created a complete emergency response grid system. Thalia studied the display, impressed by its sophistication. Each zone was color-coded based on response time needs, with detailed notes about local challenges and resources. Former gang territories had been transformed into medical response sectors. Look at this part, Marie pointed excitedly. They've identified all the medical deserts, areas where emergency response times are typically slowest. And here's the brilliant part. They're converting old gang safe houses into emergency medical supply stations. Before Thalia could respond, Magnus arrived with more news. Doc, you won't believe who just showed up at the Steel Guardians clubhouse. Representatives from 3 major hospital systems. They want to talk about implementing the Mercy Riders program citywide. The meeting that followed was unlike anything the medical community had seen. Around the conference table sat hospital administrators, emergency response coordinators, and former gang leaders, all focused on a single goal: revolutionizing urban emergency medical response. Here's what we're proposing, Wraith explained, standing before the group with newfound professionalism. Each former gang club becomes responsible for their traditional territory, but now as medical first responders. We already know every alley, every shortcut. We know which buildings have roof access for helicopter evacuations, which streets flood during storms. The Street King's leader, who now insisted on being called by his real name, Marcus, added to the presentation. Plus, we know the people. We know which buildings have elderly residents who might need regular checks, which areas have language barriers that complicate emergency response. Dr. Cyrus Windcrest, initially skeptical, found himself nodding. The data from the Mercy Riders pilot program is compelling. Response times cut in half, better community cooperation, reduced violence against medical personnel. But how do we ensure consistency across different groups? Thalia stepped forward. That's where Azure Peaks comes in. We standardize the training, create a certification program specific to motorcycle-mounted emergency response. Marie's already helping develop the curriculum. There's more, Cypher added, pulling up new slides. We've identified former members with relevant skills, ex-military medics, former EMTs, even a retired nurse who rode with the Phantom Disciples. They'll help train the next generation. The presentation continued with detailed plans for emergency supply caches, community health education programs, and a revolutionary dispatch system that would integrate traditional ambulance services with the more agile Mercy Riders units. But here's the part that really matters, Talon spoke up, his confidence growing with each day of paramedic training. We're not just creating faster emergency response, we're changing how our communities see healthcare. When the same people who used to intimidate you are now there to help you, it changes everything. As if to prove his point, a call came in over the radio. A construction accident in one of the city's most notorious neighborhoods, an area where ambulances often waited for police escorts before entering. Watch this, Thalia told the assembled officials, turning up the dispatch radio. Mercy Riders responding? Cypher's voice crackled. We have 3 units en route. ETA 3 minutes. Local team already on site securing the scene. The officials watched the response unfold on traffic cameras. Riders from 3 different former gangs converged on the location, their medical bags replacing the weapons they once carried. The scene was secured and the victim stabilized before traditional emergency services arrived. This is remarkable, one hospital administrator admitted. They're not just providing medical care, they're transforming the entire emergency response paradigm. Later that evening, back at Ravencrest Fuel Stop, Thalia found Nyx grinning as he watched the news coverage. Remember when this was just a place where people got coffee and gas? He laughed. Now we're practically an emergency response command center. He wasn't exaggerating. The fuel stop had become a natural gathering point for Mercy Riders between calls, its strategic location, and 24-hour operation making it perfect for rapid deployment. The security cameras that once watched for troublemakers now monitored emergency response zones. Got something else to show you? Nyx said, leading Thalia to the back room. What had been a simple storage area was being transformed into a fully equipped emergency medical supply station. The Riders did this, said every neighborhood needs a safe place where people can get help. Thalia's phone buzzed with a message from Vesper. You need to see the new admission stats. Violence-related ER visits down 70% in areas with Mercy Riders patrols. But here's the incredible part. Preventive care visits are up. People who never trusted the medical system are coming in for checkups because their local Mercy Rider encouraged them. The national spotlight found the Mercy Riders sooner than anyone expected. 1 month after the gas station incident, Thalia walked into Ravencrest Fuel Stop to find an unusual group waiting. Representatives from 5 major metropolitan hospitals had flown in, along with officials from the National Emergency Medical Services Association. Dr. Valenwind, a distinguished woman in a crisp suit, extended her hand. I'm Dr. Alexandra Chen, Director of Emergency Medicine Innovation at Central Medical. What you've created here, it's revolutionary. We need to talk about national implementation. Thalia gestured to the now familiar corner where Nyx was already setting up coffee. Then you'll want to meet the real architects of this program. She nodded toward Cypher, Magnus, and the other Rider leaders who were arriving for their morning briefing. We've got a situation, Cypher announced, walking in with a tablet displaying national crime statistics. Other cities are reporting increased gang violence in their medical districts. They're asking for help. Not just asking, Magnus added. 3 major motorcycle clubs from Chicago contacted us last night. They saw what happened here, how we transformed. They want to change too, but they don't know how. Dr. Chen leaned forward, studying the data. This is fascinating. In your coverage area, hospital-related violence has dropped by 75%. Emergency response times are the lowest in the country. And look at these community health metrics. It's not just about response times, Thalia explained, pulling up their training protocols. We're creating a new kind of first responder, one who knows the community because they came from it. The meeting evolved into an impromptu national planning session. Marie, now coordinating with nursing schools across the country, presented their standardized training curriculum. We're calling it the Urban Medical Response Rider Certification, she explained. It combines traditional EMT training with specialized modules for motorcycle-mounted emergency response. Talon, who had completed his paramedic certification in record time, demonstrated their custom medical equipment loadout. Standard ambulances can't access 40% of urban areas efficiently, he explained. But our bikes can get anywhere. Plus, we're teaching riders how to stabilize patients until traditional services arrive. The real innovation, Thalia added, is how this changes community healthcare dynamics. When former gang members become emergency medical responders, it transforms the entire neighborhood's relationship with healthcare. As if to prove her point, a call came in. Multiple gunshot victims, East Side Territory, the dispatcher reported. Local gang conflict. The visiting officials watched in amazement as Cypher coordinated the response. Mercy Riders responding. Local team already on scene. These are our people. They'll listen to us. Through the dispatch feed, they heard something remarkable. The shooting stopped as soon as the Mercy Riders arrived. Former rivals lowered their weapons as motorcycle-mounted medics in distinctive uniforms began treating the wounded. "They're not just responding to emergencies," Dr. Chen observed. "They're preventing them." "That's the point," Magnus explained. "When you're known for saving lives instead of taking them, it changes how people see you, and how you see yourself." The transformation was spreading faster than anyone anticipated. By nightfall, representatives from 20 cities were on a video conference, taking notes as Thalia and her team explained the program. "But how do you ensure quality control?" A skeptical administrator from Boston asked. "These are former gang members." "Watch this," Thalia replied, pulling up certification test scores. "Our Mercy Riders have a 95% pass rate on standard EMT exams. They're not just passing, they're excelling. Turns out the same focus that made them formidable on the streets makes them exceptional in emergency medicine." The questions continued late into the night. How to adapt the program for different urban environments, how to handle liability issues, how to integrate with existing emergency services. "You're thinking about this wrong," Cypher interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "You're asking how to fit us into your system. What we're doing is creating a new system, one that reaches the people who fell through the cracks of the old one." Dr. Chen's team was convinced. "We want to establish pilot programs in 5 major cities," she announced. "But we'll need your people to help train the first wave of Mercy Riders." "Already ahead of you," Marie said, pulling up another map. "We've identified former gang members in each target city who have medical training or military medical experience. They'll be our foundation." As the meeting wound down, Thalia noticed something remarkable. The visiting officials weren't just taking notes. They were witnessing a fundamental shift in how emergency medicine could work. "You know what the real story is here?" Dr. Chen said quietly to Thalia. "It's not just about faster response times or better community relations. You found a way to turn the people society feared into the ones they trust most in their worst moments." The crisis hit without warning. 3 months after the national expansion began, Thalia's phone lit up at 2 a.m. with an urgent call from Dr. Chen. "We've got trouble in Chicago." Her voice was tense. "Remember those motorcycle clubs we warned you about? The ones who refused to join the program? They're making their move." Thalia sat up in bed, instantly alert. "What kind of move?" "They're targeting Mercy Riders units. 3 emergency response bikes were vandalized last night. They're calling our people traitors, saying we've gone soft. But that's not the worst part." "What is?" "They're threatening hospitals that work with us. Left warning messages at Chicago General's ER. The staff is scared. We need help, Dr. Valenwind. Your kind of help." Within an hour, Thalia had turned Azure Peak's conference room into a command center. Cypher and Magnus coordinated with Mercy Riders chapters across 6 states while reports kept coming in. More vandalism, more threats, all targeting their emergency response programs. "They're trying to force us back to our old ways," Cypher growled, marking another incident on their map. "Want to prove we're still just thugs deep down?" "Then we prove them wrong," Thalia replied firmly. "Get every chapter leader on video conference now." As screens lit up around the room showing concerned faces from across the country, Thalia saw the true strength of what they'd built. Former rivals united, ready to protect their new purpose. "Listen up," Thalia's voice carried the authority of both combat medic and trauma nurse. "This is exactly the test we've trained for. They expect us to retaliate with violence to prove them right about us. Instead, we're going to show them what Mercy Riders really stand for." She laid out the plan. Every emergency response station would remain open, but with increased security. Hospital staff would have 24-hour protection, not from weapons, but from the constant presence of Mercy Riders doing what they did best, serving the community. "Chicago General was vandalized," Thalia continued. "Tomorrow morning, I want 50 bikes in their parking lot. Riders helping patients get to appointments, teaching basic first aid to staff, running blood pressure clinics in the lobby. Show them that for every act of destruction, we respond with twice as much healing." Talon spoke up. "The new EMT trainees are scared. Some of their old gang contacts are pressuring them to quit. Then we give them something better to fight for, Thalia answered. Launch Operation Street Medic ahead of schedule. Get those trainees working with veteran Mercy Riders, saving lives in their own neighborhoods, earning their patches through service instead of violence. The next day, something remarkable happened. When hostile bikers came to intimidate a Mercy Riders unit in Detroit, they found 100 community members forming a peaceful line outside the emergency response station. Doctors, nurses, former patients, and local residents, all wearing "I Support Mercy Riders" shirts. In Chicago, when they tried to threaten hospital staff, they found the parking lot transformed into a public health fair, with Mercy Riders teaching CPR and basic emergency response to neighborhood children, while others conducted free health screenings. But the real turning point came at Ravencrest Fuel Stop. Nyx called Thalia in a panic. A group of hostile bikers had shown up looking for trouble. By the time she arrived, she found Cypher already there, sitting with the hostile bikers, showing them videos of Mercy Riders saving lives. "You think we went soft?" Cypher was saying. "Let me tell you about real strength. Last week, I helped deliver a baby in the back of a taxi during a snowstorm. Watched that little girl take her first breath. That took more courage than any fight I've ever been in." Thalia watched from the doorway as the hostile bikers listened, their expressions changing from scorn to curiosity. One of them, a younger man with fresh prison tattoos, spoke up. "But what about brotherhood? Loyalty? Look around." Thalia stepped forward. "This is true brotherhood. Mercy Riders from 20 states offered to ride here tonight to protect this station. Not to fight, to serve. To show what loyalty really means." Over the next few hours, more arrived. Not to confront the hostile bikers, but to show them a different path. Talon brought some of his EMT trainees, who proudly demonstrated their life-saving skills. Marie arrived with stories about how former gang members were revolutionizing community healthcare. By midnight, 3 of the hostile bikers had turned in their colors, asking how they could join the Mercy Riders program. By dawn, their entire chapter was sitting in Thalia's office filling out EMT training applications. "You know what really changed their minds?" Cypher told Thalia later. "It wasn't fear of our numbers. It wasn't even seeing all the good we do. It was realizing they could be part of something bigger than themselves." The crisis had become a catalyst. Over the next week, chapters that had been targeted responded by expanding their community programs. Every act of vandalism was met with a new health initiative. Every threat answered with an invitation to join their cause. "You were right, Doctor," Chen told Thalia during an emergency leadership meeting. "The best way to fight darkness isn't with more darkness. It's by shining a light so bright they can't help but see a better way." Today in Washington, an extraordinary scene unfolded on the steps of the Department of Health and Human Services. Over 5,000 motorcycle-mounted medical responders, led by Dr. Thalia Valenwind and the original Mercy Riders, gathered for what they called the Emergency Response Revolution Rally. Thalia watched the coverage from Ravencrest Fuel Stop, surrounded by the original group that had started it all. The television showed aerial shots of motorcycles arranged to form a massive medical caduceus symbol, visible from above. What began as a confrontation at a remote gas station has evolved into one of the most successful emergency medical response innovations in recent history, the reporter continued. The Mercy Riders' handling of recent threats against their organization has drawn praise from healthcare leaders and community advocates alike. "Turn it up," Nyx called, bringing more coffee to their increasingly crowded corner. The station was packed with both locals and visiting Mercy Riders, who had come to see where it all began. The screen showed Dr. Alexandra Chen speaking from the podium. The Mercy Riders model represents a revolutionary approach to emergency medicine and community health. Today, I'm proud to announce federal support for the Emergency Response Rider Initiative, which will provide funding for similar programs nationwide. Marie, now wearing her full nursing uniform complete with a Mercy Riders patch, bounced excitedly. "Dad, they're showing your speech next." Sure enough, the coverage cut to Cypher standing at the national podium, looking nothing like the intimidating gang leader he'd been just months ago. "We used to think strength meant making others fear us," he was saying. Dr. Valenwind showed us that real strength is using your skills to save lives. Every emergency we respond to, every patient we help, every community we serve, that's not just medical care. That's warrior spirit in action. The station erupted in cheers as the coverage showed Talon leading a demonstration of their mobile trauma response protocols. But perhaps most remarkable, the reporter continued, was how the Mercy Riders handled the recent threats to their organization. Instead of retaliation, they responded with an expansion of their community health programs, turning potential enemies into allies. Thalia's phone buzzed with a message from Magnus. Just got word from Detroit. 3 more hostile clubs requesting meetings. They want to learn about the emergency response program. Dr. Vesper, who had been quietly taking notes beside Thalia, spoke up. You know what's really amazing? The numbers just came in. Emergency response times in communities with Mercy Riders units have dropped by 45% nationally. We're not just saving lives, we're revolutionizing how emergency medicine reaches underserved areas. The news coverage shifted to interviews with hospital administrators across the country. They spoke about dramatic decreases in ER violence, improved community relations, and unprecedented cooperation between medical services and local communities. Look at this, Talon pointed to his tablet, showing Thalia a social media trend. Mercy Revolution was trending worldwide, with people sharing stories of how the program had transformed their community's access to emergency care. National EMS just called, Cypher added. They want to make our motorcycle response protocols part of standard emergency medical training. They're calling it the Community Integrated Response Model. Thalia took it all in. The crowded station, the national coverage, the messages pouring in from around the country. She thought back to that night when she'd stood up to protect herself and others, never imagining where it would lead. You know what's funny? She said to Nyx, who had finally taken a break to sit with them. Everyone keeps talking about how we changed these bikers, but the truth is, we just showed them who they could be if someone believed in them. Speaking of belief, Nyx grinned. Wait until you see what's coming. The station's door opened, and in walked a group Thalia never expected. Her old combat medical unit, led by her former commanding officer, followed by representatives from every major emergency response organization in the country. Dr. Valenwind, her old CO smiled. We need to talk about taking the Mercy Riders program global. Turns out other countries have emergency response challenges too. As the station filled with more voices, more stories, more plans for the future, Thalia realized that what had started as a single stand against intimidation had become something far more powerful. A movement that proved the strongest forces for change aren't the ones that tear things down, but the ones that build people up. Nyx brought another round of coffee for everyone, then paused by Thalia's chair. You know, Doc, when you first started coming here, you were trying to leave your combat medic life behind. Instead, you showed us all what being a true healer really means. The transition to international expansion began in the most unexpected way. Thalia was on a video call with a Mercy Riders chapter in Los Angeles when an unusual request came through from the British National Health Service. They're calling it Operation Global Mercy, Cypher explained, pulling up emails on the command center's main screen. Emergency response teams from 15 countries want to adapt our program, but that's not even the surprising part. What is? Thalia asked, though she had a feeling she knew what was coming. Motorcycle clubs from abroad, not just American ones anymore. We're getting requests from groups in Europe, Asia, South America. They've all seen what happened here, how we transformed street culture into emergency response culture. The first test case came from Japan, where a group of former Bosozoku riders had reached out after seeing the Mercy Riders story go viral. They wanted to work with local emergency services and transform their clubs into rapid response units, but cultural differences posed unique challenges. How do we adapt our model to different healthcare systems? Talon wondered during the planning meeting. What works in American cities might not work in Tokyo or London. Thalia thought about it for a moment. Then we let them show us how it should work. We provide the framework. They build it their way. Within weeks, Thalia found herself on a video call with Kenji Yamamoto, a former Bosozoku leader turned emergency response innovator. His group had already started working with Japanese emergency services, combining motorcycle skill with traditional Japanese values of service and honor. "We call ourselves the Swift Dragons," Kenji explained through an interpreter. "Your Mercy Rider story showed us how to keep our brotherhood while finding a higher purpose." The adaptations were fascinating. In Britain, former outlaw bike clubs worked with NHS paramedics to create heritage response units, specializing in reaching remote rural areas. In Brazil, riders organized motorcycle-mounted clinics for favela communities that traditional ambulances couldn't access. Back at Ravencrest Fuel Stop, Thalia shared these developments with an ever-growing audience. "Look at this." She showed Nyx her tablet. The screen displayed photos from around the world. German bikers running mobile vaccination clinics, Australian riders conducting outback medical evacuations, South Korean chapters providing emergency response along remote mountain roads. "It's like watching light spread," Nyx mused. "Each country makes it their own, but the heart stays the same." Marie, who had become the unofficial chronicler of the Mercy movement, was creating a digital map showing the program's global reach. "Every dot represents a different story," she explained proudly. "But they're all connected." The real breakthrough came when the World Health Organization contacted them. Their proposal was unprecedented, using the Mercy Riders model in disaster response zones to help communities rebuild their emergency medical systems. "Think about it," the WHO coordinator urged during a conference call. "If you can turn rival bikers into emergency responders, why not apply the same principles to regions recovering from natural disasters or conflicts?" Thalia found herself working with an increasingly diverse team. Dr. Vesper handled medical protocol adaptation, Cypher coordinated with international motorcycle clubs, and Talon developed training programs that could work across different cultures and healthcare systems. The most powerful moment came during the first International Mercy Rider Summit in Geneva. Former rivals from dozens of countries shared their experiences. A British ex-rocker worked alongside a French former gang member to demonstrate their emergency response techniques. Japanese Swift Dragons taught Australian chapters about incorporating local emergency response traditions. "You've created something extraordinary," Dr. Chen told Thalia as they watched the summit unfold. "This isn't just emergency response anymore. It's become a model for turning conflict into cooperation." But it was Kenji who perhaps understood it best. He had been invited to speak about the Japanese adaptation of the program. "When I lost my way in the Bosozoku," he told the gathered crowd, "I thought I lost my honor." The Mercy Riders didn't just show us a new way to ride. They showed us how to find honor in service to others. The movement kept growing in unexpected ways. In Ireland, former paramilitary members worked together through the program, using motorcycle response units as a way to heal old wounds. In South Africa, the program brought together riders from formerly segregated communities. One evening, as Thalia watched video feeds from Mercy programs around the world, she noticed something remarkable. Whether it was in Tokyo or London, Rio or Berlin, the same scene played out. Former enemies working side by side, teaching emergency response, helping communities, saving lives. "You know what this reminds me of?" Cypher said, watching footage from a new chapter in Lebanon. "That night in the gas station when you showed us there was another way to be strong." "This is different," Thalia replied. "Now they're showing each other. Each new chapter learns from the ones before, then adds their own wisdom to share with those who come after." The United Nations General Assembly Hall fell silent as Thalia Valenwind took the podium. Behind her, a massive screen showed real-time data from Mercy Riders units responding to emergencies across the globe. 5 years had passed since that fateful night at Ravencrest Fuel Stop, and what began as a confrontation had evolved into something that was revolutionizing emergency medical response worldwide. "When I first stood up in that gas station," Thalia began, her voice carrying the same quiet confidence that had faced down the Crimson Tempests, "I was just protecting myself and others. I never imagined that moment would grow into a movement that would unite emergency responders across cultures, borders, and beliefs." The assembly hall was packed with representatives from every corner of the healthcare world. emergency response coordinators, hospital administrators, and most importantly, Mercy Riders leaders from over 50 countries, each wearing their distinctive patches that had become synonymous with hope in crisis. The numbers tell an extraordinary story, Dr. Chen added, joining Thalia at the podium. Global emergency response times reduced by 52% in areas with active Mercy Riders units. Violence against medical personnel down by 78%. But the most remarkable statistic is this: over 100,000 former gang members and outlaw bikers now serving as certified emergency medical responders. Cypher, now the International Director of Mercy Riders Training, stepped forward to share the latest innovation. Today, we're launching the Global Emergency Response Network. Every Mercy Riders unit, from Tokyo to Toronto, connected through a single dispatch system. When disaster strikes anywhere in the world, the nearest units can respond immediately. The screens behind them showed the system in action. Motorcycle units in the Philippines responding to a typhoon. Brazilian riders evacuating flood victims. British teams reaching snowbound villages. Each scene demonstrated how the program had evolved far beyond its origins. But the real transformation, Thalia continued, isn't in the technology or the response times. It's in how we've changed the very nature of emergency response. When those who were once feared in a community become its most trusted protectors, it changes everything. Marie, now a fully qualified emergency room nurse and director of the Mercy Riders Training Academy, presented the next phase of their evolution. We're not just responding to emergencies anymore. Our units are preventing them. Former gang territories have become health education zones. Old rival boundaries are now coordinated emergency response sectors. The presentation was interrupted by a real-time emergency alert. A major earthquake had struck Mexico City. Without missing a beat, the assembly watched as Mercy Riders units from 6 countries mobilized, their coordinated response displayed on the giant screens. "This is what we trained for," Cypher spoke into his radio, his voice broadcast through the UN hall. "All units, remember your oath. We ride not for glory but for those who need us." Back at Ravencrest Fuel Stop, where it all began, Nyx had set up screens to let the local community watch the UN presentation. The station, now a certified emergency response hub, was packed with people who had been part of the story from the beginning. "Remember when we thought this place was just going to be a gas station?" Nyx laughed, serving coffee to a group that included both original Mercy Riders and former adversaries who had found a new path. Dr. Vesper, now heading the International Emergency Medicine Association, shared the latest research. "What started here didn't just change emergency response. It's changing how we think about community healing. The Mercy Riders model is being adapted for everything from disaster relief to conflict resolution." As the UN session concluded, Thalia found herself surrounded by the original team that had started it all. Cypher, who had traded his gang leadership for a mission of healing. Marie, whose nursing career had inspired a new generation of medical professionals. Talon, whose EMT training program had become a global standard. "You know what the real legacy is?" Thalia asked them, watching the screens as Mercy Riders units around the world continued their life-saving work. "It's not just about faster response times or better medical care. It's about proving that anyone can change, that strength can be redirected, that enemies can become healers." The final images showed new Mercy Riders chapters being established in countries that had once been torn by conflict. Former rivals worked side by side, their old animosities forgotten in their shared mission of emergency response and community care. "Sometimes," Thalia concluded at the UN podium, "the greatest battles we fight aren't against others but against our own preconceptions of what's possible. And sometimes the strongest warriors aren't those who can hurt others, but those who choose to heal instead." As the assembly rose in standing ovation, the screens showed a final image. The Ravencrest Fuel Stop at dawn, a new day breaking over the place where a nurse's stand against intimidation had sparked a global revolution in emergency medical response. The legacy of that night continued to grow, proving that sometimes the most powerful changes start not with grand plans, but with one person willing to stand up and show others a better way to be strong. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.